Good morning to everyone listening today. Today is our first discussion of the series Home Education Hub. And this came about because we've had a lot of our subscribers email us in, message us on Twitter, and ask for more information on home educating. And we have about 5 common questions that keep coming up. So what we've done is reached out to some people in the home educating world, and absolutely delighted today to have Monica O'Connor on, who is a mother of 6 children. They have all been home educated from birth. Age ranges are age 16 to 38. So one is currently doing a Leaving Cert equivalent to get into 3rd level, and the other children range from being self-employed, graduating with first class honors, and doing what they love. You have musicians in your family, so it just sounds like a real success story. So really excited, Monica, that you were able to take the time out of your busy week, I'm sure, with the home educating and life, to come on and answer these questions, to help our subscribers believe in themselves if they do decide to take that home education path. So I guess I'd like to start it out with one of the most frequently asked questions that come up is, people say, well, gosh, there's a cost of living crisis. You know, they're either a solo parent or they're a family that has 2 parents working at least one job, and they feel like they're already struggling to make ends meet. How could they balance home educating with children or a child at home while still working to pay the bills? If you want to sort of kind of answer that obstacle question that comes up a lot.
Sure, Jana, and lovely to chat to you. Thanks so much for inviting me. I guess I suppose that is looking at it, if you don't mind me saying, from the wrong end. So people who are in the situation you describe have decided for whatever reason, maybe they thought it was the best thing, or maybe they didn't think, maybe they didn't realize that there was an alternative. So people who are in the situation you describe are outsourcing what to me is the most important part of parenting after giving birth to your child and breastfeeding them and then learning to walk and talk. So in my case, I was very, very lucky that when my first child was 9 months old in 1987, I met a family who were home educating their then 3 children. And they were an English South African family living in Ireland. And they educated me. I was 19, just turning 20. And they educated me into the fact that the Irish Constitution, Bunreacht na hÉireann, says that parents and the family actually are the primary educators of the children, and that parents can choose to send their children to a school set up by the state or to a private school, or they can choose to take responsibility for their own children's education. So I'd be very conscious of the idea that where there's a will, there's a way. And if home education is really important to you, you will make whatever changes in your family finances are require this. So with my first child, I was a solo parent. I was a teenage parent. I was in college. I was 18 when I got pregnant, and I left college to be a full-time mommy. And I subsequently got married and had more children. We separated. I was a lone parent. A single mom again, with when the younger 2 youngest 2 were 7 and 11, and then I was widowed. So I have, I guess, been that married family mother, with a guy bringing in a wage, and I've been a teenage mom, and now in my 50s I'm widowed. And all along, no matter what challenges financially were thrown at us, it was never an issue that I was going to outsource the education of my children to the state. That was never kind of one of the choices that sort of presented itself as something that would be good for our family. So I guess people are creative, and if people decide that the education of their precious children is actually their responsibility and not the state's, then I guess they will make whatever changes they need to their circumstance. And for instance, we didn't do foreign holidays. We never had a car that was younger than 9 years of age. We shopped for clothes in secondhand shops. So you will make whatever choices. And I guess with a large family of different ages, it doesn't all fall on the parents. There's a point where I think when you are transmitting information, which is what I see education as, to me, I guess it's seamless. There's no day when I stopped being my child's mother and became their teacher. I don't describe anything I have done as ever teaching my children. I answer their questions. They ask a lot of questions. I've never been able to answer all their questions. But fortunately, we had pre-internet days. We had encyclopedia. We had members of the community. We had older relatives and friends and mentors to describe things and explain things to the children. And now everybody has a supercomputer in their pocket. So information and knowledge is not something that our society lacks, but critical thinking is definitely something that I hope we've been able to transmit as home educating parents.
Yeah, that's beautifully put. And I've had the opportunity to speak to a lot of home educators. In fact, my first cousin home educated her two children, and they've both gone on to be very critically thinking, successful adults. I also hosted a home educated child in Ireland a few years ago, and her mom home educated all six children. And the one thing that stuck out to me most from her visit and staying with us for a week is she said, with home educating, the learning never stops. And she said, in the mainstream schools, kids in August are getting that, oh no, summer's ending and we have to go back to school, and that feeling in their guts, and that they don't want the summer and fun to end. But she said that they take a little bit of time off in the summer from the official kind of schooling, but all six kids couldn't wait for August to start, or September to start even, because they couldn't wait to just roll their sleeves up and jump in and learn. And it was child led, and all six children sort of help build their own journey. And they really, I suppose, what they learned home educating that they didn't learn in school was the love for learning and that interest and that passion for learning. And they got really excited. I remember there was a lesson one time they wanted to learn about, say, the phases of the moon. And the mother said, okay, let's just spend the next few weeks learning about that. And they did a deep dive and learned all about the phases of the moon, how it works. And they now, for the rest of their lives, will remember that lesson. Now, as a mom who's 50, I probably couldn't tell you all about the phases of the moon, but that was just a beautiful lesson for those children to learn that they can teach their children. And it was something they did projects on and loved. So that came really stuck out to me. And the other question that people ask is, we have parents who say, gosh, I'm not a teacher, or maybe I wasn't that academic. I was terrible at math or history or Irish or what have you. Am I good enough? How do I make sure that my child or children get the well-rounded education and get what they need to be successful if they don't feel themselves good enough? So I suppose, how do you overcome the feeling of I'm not good enough, but also what resources might be out there for someone who, say, isn't good at math? So
Okay, a friend of mine who's got four now almost all adults, so the youngest is 16 and the eldest I think is 26 or 27, and she says, I can't understand why people are buying expensive curriculum or curricula. I can't understand why people think that they have to pay. Why is education something we think has to be paid for, or that a private education in a posh boarding school? I heard recently figures for Clongowes that leaving cert year is 24,000 for the year. And I guess that we come back to the cost thing. I guess not putting uniforms on any of my children till they were 12, and most of them not going into an institution education setting until they were 16. I saved a fortune in school books, in uniforms, in petrol and wear and tear on a car, tires, because we live now 2 miles from our local school. Yeah, I mean, the resources, the information's all there. I guess the question that you pose is one that I hear a lot. people say I wasn't any good at pick a subject. And we're back to who's the active person in the process. You are not the teacher. Your job as the parent, if you decide to be a home educator, is to set up the environment and to make sure that if your child is interested in something, that you will do whatever it takes to find them the information that they need for that subject. So that might be going to a museum or going to a talk, or looking at some webinars, looking at some recordings of something. There is a host of information. Most of my children are pretty high level musicians. I'm not. I couldn't teach the clarinet, and that's what my 16-year-old is in the National Youth Orchestra playing on. What I could do was find him a teacher. What I could do was look at options to get him a better quality instrument that we couldn't pay for. So we applied for a grant. What I could do was drive him to lessons. So I did what I could do. And on his downtime, he at 16 has his own timetable where he likes to play music for 3 hours a day. And the thing that he's frustrated at is a 4-day a week attending a QQI course, which will be the equivalent of a Leaving Cert and will equip him to apply to universities to study. The frustrating thing for him is that 4 days a week he has to leave the house at 8, and some days he's not back till 6. And where is he going to get his 3 hours? Self-imposed schedule. No teacher told him to do this, and I certainly didn't stand over him and say, I want you to become the best clarinet player in Ireland, and I want you to practice for 3 hours a day. This is all, the thing is, the secret is people, human beings, including our babies, including our toddlers, including our preschoolers, including our 4-year-olds and 6-year-olds and 8-year-olds, love learning if we don't make it a chore. The problem that the parents often have to overcome is the belief that unless you've written something down, unless there's something to be graded, that it hasn't been learned. I never made my children write a book report. We sometimes joke about it as if it would be something. So if they read a book, it's because they love it. If they don't like it, they put it down. I accord my children the same respect that I would like to be accorded myself as a human being. If I pick up a book and I don't like it, nobody's going to, what's the loss if I stop reading at page 20? There's no value that I can see on the human beings that I have raised and witnessed, because I know a lot of other families with a lot of kids, and forcing children to do things isn't really a good lesson. It teaches people the wrong things.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And something you said there about the book report hit home with me is I remember in school, I went to mainstream school myself all my life. And I remember there would be times when you'd be so busy. I was playing sports and social teenager, and you'd have this big book report due. And all of us would get on and go to the shop and order the Cliff Notes, which was a bright yellow book with black lines. It looked very much like the COVID signs we saw for those years. And we'd read a condensed version and quickly do a book report just to tick the box. We didn't read the book. We didn't enjoy the book. It was just that, oh no, it's due Friday and we've had 2 soccer games and training every day. I just have to get that in. So it was very much just a box ticking exercise. And if I had to tell you now, all about my lessons in algebra, calculus, anatomy, physiology, and everything else I learned, I probably didn't remember any of it because much of the mainstream was a tick the box exercise to get in the grades, to get into 3rd level, to get your degree. And again, all the box ticking. I suppose the question some parents have is, let's just say, for example, I'll use my own situation. My daughter wants to be a veterinarian. She has since she's 2. She loves animals, wants to heal every animal she finds, even if it's a bee in the forest that's not feeling well. If she wanted to be a veterinarian, and let's just say I wasn't good at science, would there be a way for parents to create some sort of curriculum at home if they wish, or a way to get those materials to kind of stimulate that learning? Are there resources out there so you could make sure I don't want to say that they get the sheep dip like a school if they get all the subjects, but a way just to give those parents that ease of they're learning the basics, the reading, the writing, the math, etc.? Like, what resources would be out there if you choose to go that route?
I guess the resources are there if you want them. The best resource you will find, if this is a scary new path for you as a parent, the best resource is find yourself another home educator. The Home Education Network has been in existence since the law was changed in 2000, and has a series of parents who are all home educating themselves, who are there at the end of the phone and will answer your questions. I take phone calls from parents, and they're generally at least a half hour long, and we go through all these things that people are nervous about. I once had a dad phone me and say that he was involved with trying to withdraw his son from school, who was floundering, and the lad was now a young teenager, maybe 13, 14, and the education welfare officer in the school was involved and was saying things like, you're not allowed to home educate your child because you won't be able to teach him maths. And I said, what's the story? Why is maths the big one? Like, does he want to be an engineer? And he said, no, he's no interest in that. I said, okay. He said, he's always failed maths. I said, so hold on. Your son has been in school since he was 4. He's now 14. He's never met the school standard of maths. The school calls that failing at maths, and your son thinks he's a failure at maths. And you're not allowed to take him out of school and give him a different approach when he has always labeled himself a failure with maths. And so the dad thought about it for a minute and said, yeah, you're right. And then I said, does he have functional maths? And he said, what do you mean? I said, can he read a bus school timetable? Can he get the correct change in the shop? How much maths do most of us need in everyday life? And if your child wants to be something that requires more science or more technical issues, like you're talking about your daughter wanting to be a veterinarian, all the information is there online. When my son is not playing the clarinet and the piano for his downtime for 3 hours a day, he is looking on YouTube at videos of clarinet players he admires. He is watching talks by conductors he admires. He is looking at how to be a composer. He is researching all the other bits of information that he certainly won't get from me. But the secret, which most people don't seem to get, is you don't have to teach or know anything. The only requirement is, do you love your child, and can you give them the time and the space to find out what they love and to facilitate what they love?
Brilliant. Yeah, that I think that what you said takes pressure off a lot of the parents who maybe wouldn't be their kid wants to be an engineer, but they don't have a math or science bone in their body. So it takes that pressure off, that the info is out there. There is there are resources. The Home Education Network, you had said, that's in place since 2000.
I'm the County Carlow contact. So when you go on henireland.org, you will see each county of the country mentioned. And if there is an adult, a parent in that county who has said, yeah, you can let my name or email address go forward, there are contacts there, and you can, there are on various other groups, like Telegram is one of them, but I know there's stuff on Facebook as well for nearly each county in the country, to say, okay, we're going to meet at this beach if we're in Cork or Kerry. We're going to meet in this forest if we're in Leitrim or Longford. There are ways of connecting with people. And my experience, certainly when I had all those questions, I was afraid to throw out my university chemistry notes, because I said, what if I have to be able to teach chemistry? And my child was 4 at that point. And he did want a chemistry set when he was 10, but like every 10-year-old boy, he just wanted really a liter of vinegar and a tub of bread soda so he could make pretend volcanoes. I mean, that was really the kind of... Now, he works in the bar. He worked in the bar of a golf club in Hawaii and Maui for 10 years, and he now lives in Montana. So he's into cocktails. So is that chemistry? Discuss. But he's into sports, he's into travel, and he has been able to fund that through his life. But the thing, I guess as well, so a child may have a huge desire to do a martial art at one point, and you may see that needing to be a project, or you may want to see the motivation in your child that they're going to continue and get a black belt. And I would caution against that attitude. We allow ourselves as adults, we allow our friends to start crochet, to start woodwork, to start a project, and to leave it to one side when life gets busy or we find another interest. And I think we need to be as respectful of our children's time. I don't think I taught my children anything. What I did was provided the space and time for them to find the things they loved. I didn't, as far as I can see, I didn't teach a child to read. I didn't set out with, today you're learning to read. All my children read, some at the age of 6.5, some not till the age of 10.5. That would have been a problem in school because it's hard to keep up in a book-based education institution if you are not reading along. Did it hold that young person back? No. So, and there's a lot of research that actually, and particularly for boys, it's better if we don't push reading at 5, 6, 7, if we let them find letters. The story I like best about quote unquote late reading for a home educator is a friend of mine with 6 children, and her second did not read, could not read, would not read until he was 11.75. He's in his 40s now, and he has a master's in librarianship.
Yeah,
So what would have
that's a
been a
really good
problem?
point. Every child is unique, and to put them, I suppose the challenge with mainstream is there's 30 kids in a class, there's standardized tests, they all get dipped through, they're all expected to learn at the same pace. If they don't, they have, an SNA that might come in or extra help, but pretty much it's more of a conveyor belt system, whereas every child is so unique and every child has different interests. Like my little boy is 6, and my kids don't have tablets, they don't have phones, they don't have any screens. And my little boy would sit in his Lego room at this big Lego table and create. He plans his Lego, he designs it with the architecture, he tells me the stories. He's now writing names of his characters. So that Lego for him is that learning moment. My daughter loves to write. She's writing a book at the moment. She loves to paint. She loves nature. They grow their own food. So all of those little pockets of learning at home are so important. And I think that maybe some parents think that wouldn't be schooling, but for a child to sit there and design his Lego and build it and talk about it, that is stimulating that creative brain. So I think that's a really good point you made there with that. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think basically, if I had to describe the way we approached learning in our home, it was to say that it was interest led by the child. I would also, unschooling is one of the labels that fits, because I didn't go out in September and buy the most expensive or the most aligned with our family values kind of curriculum, because I didn't see that that was necessary. I'm If it's your birthday and if it's Christmas, you're going to get a book. That's not even your present. You're just going to get a book. I like buying books. I like giving books. So my children have gotten clever about it, and they some of them read Ursula Le Guin, and some of them read Brandon Sanderson, a lot of fantasy, and some of them went through young adult phases. At one point, we had a local group of home educating families who had a book club, and Michael Morpurgo, a lot of them were kind of girls around the 7, 8, 9, 10 age. So we would have looked at War Horse and various stories. Michael Morpurgo has I don't even know if I'm pronouncing his surname correctly, but you'll find his books. They're widely available in the library. You don't need to spend a lot of money to home educate. You just need to be open to the idea that it's actually so much fun to watch your children discover things. I didn't want to continue, in my own case, very personally, I didn't want to continue my my education in third level to the degree that I would have to not see my child during the day. And I did a degree at night, but that doesn't matter. That was just for myself. And I did it when my child was happy enough to be away from me. Um, I think we need to get back to the idea that a family is young people and small people and older people all working together for the common goal of let's have a warm home and some food on the table. So what I do have is 6 people who are all very interested in food and very interested in cooking, because at no point was it only my job to make sure that there was healthy food available for everybody. You have so much time when you're not sending everybody out the door for a 9 to 1 or 9 to 2 or 9 to 3 or then 9 to 4 kind of a timetable. And you have time for people to experiment and time to learn to bake and learn to cook. And again, that wasn't my job to teach them. I made bread, I make scones, I made dinners, but one lad particularly got very interested in Jamie Oliver, looked at all his videos, his television programs or his stuff on YouTube about how to um, bake and cook various things. And then that would set off a whole lot of experiments. And there are people who say, oh yes, we're not teaching math, but you know, if you get the recipe for chocolate chip cookies, which I guess is what a lot of kids in this house started learning to cook, and you know your friends are coming and there's 5 in their family, so we better make double the recipe, and people turn that into a teachable moment or something that's quote unquote educational. You know, our kids are very intelligent and they can be very resistant, particularly a child for whom school has been a very difficult a torturous kind of situation, and I use torture advisedly, having seen children take a lot of time to heal after a bullying situation in school. You know, you just don't need to make the ordinary things of um, cooking and cleaning and doing your own laundry. Oh, that's another thing. Like the children in our house did their own laundry from a very early age, because they were at home to do it. And again, I didn't see it as my job to do everybody's laundry once they're up on their feet, you know, no longer in nappies and can, you know, small children can match socks, you know, like the idea that mothering is a drudge or, you know, some kind of a cross for your back or something like that is something that I want. Certainly in my own life, that hasn't been my experience.
Yeah.
It's not that I loved every minute of it, but uh, it was something, it was, you know, home education was a family project. It wasn't just something top down, parents decide, and this is what's happening, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's great. I think the most busy or stressful part of parenting is, oh gosh, I have to get them on the bus and pick them up from school and run them to this and that. And it's that schedule. You're living by that alarm clock. You're living by that really busy schedule and timetable. There isn't that flexibility. So if that element was removed and you could just go with it and let it be child led, let it be a beautiful experience, it would probably take some of the pressure off. The next question we had from parents that's come in is, you know, some parents, you know, maybe they want to do like a co-op system. So rather than home educate their children, you know, 5 or 4 days a week or however many days it is with the plan, is get together with other families to create a co-op, which also would alleviate pressure financially. If someone, like for example, I know an entrepreneur who wants to home educate, she could maybe do some lessons with a few of the families on a Monday, someone else on a Tuesday, someone else Wednesday, so the kids have different sort of in educators throughout the week. Have you seen anything like that work in Ireland? A co-op system, kind of helping share the load. It takes a village, I suppose. That model.
Yes, I am personally aware of at least two. One that worked up in the kind of Midlands area, which would have been a couple of families. I think there were 4 or 5 at one point. and they would pick one day a week maybe and rotate whose house they were in. And parents who weren't in employment would be present at that. And sometimes I've seen families where they got a community centre, and one day a month, one person was particularly interested in science, one adult, one parent. And so that mum would plan an experiment or a topic and present on that. Children who wanted to listen to it were free to, and children who didn't want to, there was a playground beside where they could run around. There was everything from babes in arms. Like, we have to get away, I think, from the idea of stratifying it, of saying that, you know, a babe in arms is not being educated. If you have been with your small person till they were 3, you have done the most impressive bit of education that you'll ever do in that child's life. Going from being a very dependent little creature who needs mum or dad to make sure they're fed and warm and clean, and learning to walk and learning to talk. Once you've mastered that, the rest of it is literally a piece of cake. And I would be very surprised to see a child grow up in a house where the parents valued reading and literature, and we're talking about books and ideas, discussing politics, discussing the way that the world is going. I'd be really surprised to see children who didn't grow up with some of those interests and some of those values. To me, what we're talking about is what do we want at the end of the day? We want independent human beings who care about each other. That's my goal as in rearing 6 children and being a foster carer at one point as well for other kids. I want people to be kind at the end of the day. I want people to share. I want people to care about each other. I would like to, if I become older and in need of care at some point, I'd like that to be given to me by somebody who doesn't resent it. And I think I've given myself the best chance of having unresentful caring given to me at any point should I require that, because I didn't resent. I loved, absolutely adored, like small babies, and then babies getting up on their feet and babies learning things. To me, that was all an adventure, and I wouldn't have missed that for the world. It was the biggest adventure of my life, was accompanying my children on their learning journeys. And I hope it has set them up for the future, what they would say when they're asked about it. And I have a YouTube channel where I've got 16 young home educated Irish adults who were all unschooled and very few did a Leaving Cert, have talked to me about how they learned in their families and what they're doing now. There's plenty of research out there if people would like to just bust the myths and the prejudices and the biases. Do you know, education as a system, Pádraig Pearse called it the murder machine. I wonder what he was talking about. We might have set up universal schooling at a time when parents needed to work in factories or needed to work away from the home. But for most of the millennia or centuries, however, pick a number and say that's how long human beings have been on the planet, you know, we cared for our small dependent creatures, babies, until they got onto their feet and were helpful in whatever the family was doing, whether that was gathering sticks to keep the fire going, because at our latitude, you know, being able to cook your food and being able to keep yourself warm in the winter is one of the most important family tasks, and small children can help with that, and small children want to help with that. Small children want to do whatever we are doing. And I honestly believe that if I have anything, I had patience when I had a 2-year-old who wants to help me break an egg into making scones. So now I've got people who are decent cooks and don't think that they don't think there's anything beyond them. They don't think there's something they can't do, because, and it wasn't a case of me knowing stuff. It was a case of, well, let's find out. It was an adventure and a journey.
Yeah, and something that I just something you said really stuck with me is you want children to grow up to be kind, and I think I'd like to comment on that, because that's a word in the mainstream schools we hear all the time. But what's happening now is our children are born kind, they're born full, they're born as good-natured little humans. But what's happening, we hear from a lot of parents in the mainstream, is that the they're breaking the spirit of true kindness, and they're breaking the spirit of critical thinking, and they're forcing beliefs, political beliefs in the classroom onto children. And if that child uses their critical thinking, for example, saying there's only two sexes, you can't change sex, that child is actually getting ostracized, excluded, and bullied. So it's actually knocking the true kindness out of the child by breaking their spirit and making them accept things that don't involve critical thinking, that's more critical theory. So I think that what's happening in mainstream, although it's under the guise of kindness and inclusion and diversity, it's actually just the opposite. It's knocking those qualities out of the child. So I wanted to bring that up because a lot of our parents are considering in our networks home educating because of that particular issue in the schools.
Absolutely.
With
I think
that.
at the end of the day, it's about values, and it's about transmitting
Yeah.
those. And that's not about
Mm-hmm.
preaching. It's not about what we say. It's more about how we act to each other. And our kids are
Mm-hmm.
very good at reading our hearts. And they
Mm-hmm.
know if we have a particular neighbor that drives us, or a relative who drives us absolutely bonkers, and they can read your face and your body language, because a child's actual survival depends on knowing what mum or dad think, and knowing whether mum and dad is a safe place. And you know, we need to be honest about, are our schools today safe places for our children?
Yeah,
Be honest about that. Like,
we've done a lot of discussions on that. So I'll refer anyone listening to our YouTube channel on what's happening in the schools. So even separate to all of the things that you had talked about, you've home educated your children, 6 kids from birth, starting in the 80s. But now we have a whole new element of what's happening in mainstream, that even parents who weren't considering home educating at all are now very keen to learn more. One of the questions people have, there's a couple more questions I'll cover before we conclude, one is, how do your children become, make friendships for life? I suppose the myth out there is they go to school, they make friends, they play in the yard, and those are their lifelong friendships. If I take my children out of mainstream, how will they build those friendships, and how will I find maybe other people in my area to have as friends?
I guess any long-term home educated parent, and in fact the kids, there's a family we know in Dublin, and they call the socialization the eye roll question. Like, what a silly way to look at why you would incarcerate children from 9 until 4, because that's where the other human beings the same age as them are, you know. So my children, okay, and I think this works too if it's an only child. You learn how to be together as a family. That's how you learn to socialize. It's the relationship. You start with the relationship with your mum, and widen that to include dad, hopefully, and your siblings. And that's how we learn how to get along with each other. Now, when we force 4-year-olds into a classroom situation where they're only with other 4-year-olds, and they're with one adult for 4 or 5 hours a day, you cannot expect, human nature being what it is, you cannot expect 24 or 32 people the same age to be friends, to get along with each other. I'm 57, and I rarely, if ever, socialize now with people who are only 57. I never socialize in groups of 24 or 32, which the classes would have been in my school days. That is a completely artificial situation. Maura Mallarney home educated a large family and wrote a book called Anything School Can Do, You Can Do Better. The book is great. The title isn't, because I didn't want to do what school was doing. But she says in that book, the only time you have to think of yourself in a group of 30 is if you're going to join the army after school. And when she was writing, it was still true, or a religious order. And that's no longer true, that you need to think of yourself in a group of 30 if you're joining a religious order, because it's so rare nowadays. So we've set up this completely artificial situation, and then we expect kids to get along with each other. Whereas how specifically my children found their friends was, there were other home ed families, so those kids were available during the day. they were able to, and there were the best case scenario, I guess, you strike gold, you get lucky, you win the lotto if your kids are friends with a family where you're friends with the parents. You share the values, not all exclusively, because you know, I don't want to make it look like this is some kind of a cult and I've got some kind of list of 10 questions, and unless you believe the same as me on these issues, then I'm not going to socialize or let my kids be with you, because our children are going to meet out every day people who disagree with
Mhm.
them about everything from what their favorite fruit is to who they would vote for in an election. And I think how we teach our children to deal with difference and to be truly diverse and truly
Mhm.
inclusive is not what we say, but how we treat other
Mhm.
people in the community. And my children got a much more rounded socializing experience because when they were small, they came to the library with me during the day. They came to the post office. There they met people in their 90s and people who were 9 days old. And they learned how to interact with people of various ages. They never had to think of themselves as only able to talk to the people. One of the foster families that I knew for a while, they told me about a situation. I said, how is that child coping now that they've had to change schools? And they said, well, it's not great because when first class come out at lunch break, first class are only allowed to be in this area of the yard. And there's an older sibling in second class, and they're not allowed to cross the line and come over and give their younger sibling a hug if they're having a hard day. And again, what do we want at the end of the day? Do we want our young people to be independent, caring, eh, you know, people in their community who, if they see someone who needs help or is in distress, will they try to alleviate that? That's basically
Yeah.
what I'm trying at the end of the day. I'm not really interested in the academic honors. It's not that it's not important to apply yourself to a goal. And my young people who have decided to go into university have come out with first class honors degrees because it was something they chose to do, and it accorded with their passion. It wasn't something that anyone said to them, oh, that's a really good career for you to go into because there are lots of opportunities. It was, what do you love? If I gave my kids anything, it was the time to find out what they loved and to give them the time and space to find their own um, happiness in that and find their own motivation to be better
Mhm.
today. They weren't comparing themselves to their siblings, and they weren't comparing themselves when they were 12 or 16 to other people who were 12 or 16. It wasn't about competition. It wasn't about who's the best in the class. It's, am I better today than I was yesterday at building a Lego tower, or, you know, creating a volcano with the vinegar and bread soda, or at playing that particular piece on the piano or guitar or flute.
Mhm. That's great. That's really, really good insight. Thanks for that. The next question people ask is for third level. So, now we have the very structured primary, secondary, transition year, leaving cert. They go through the process and they take their leaving certs and get all the results and get into the university of their choice or what have you. If I'm a home educated child, what is the path if I wish to go to third level? What are the requirements as far as any tests or requirements for them to get into the school of their choice? If you could kind of touch on that.
In my own case, um, my older two decided to go into secondary. They started just before they were 13. They went into first year, came out, and one went back and did transition year and fifth and sixth, and one went back and did fifth and sixth and did leaving cert. So my older two got a leaving cert and then went on to do further education and training. The next four, at the age of 16, went to a local college of or an institute of further education and training. They're in most big towns in the country. You can do a level 5, a QQI 5, which is the leaving cert equivalent. It's 4 days a week. Usually some of the art-based courses might be 5 days a week. There's work experience built into it. And for most university courses, there are places where QQI candidate are actually told that they have their degree for choice before everybody else. So, for instance, one of mine on the 6th of June, the year that he was still 16, he was turning 17 the following month. Everybody else was starting their leaving cert on the 6th of June, and he received in the post an offer of his university place on the 6th of June. Much easier than struggling through a leaving cert, doing subjects that you don't like to get into something that you do want to do. So in my case, in our family's case, at 16, they knew what they wanted to do, and they started the QQI, and the youngest is doing that this year. For other young people who've been home educated, a lot of them got jobs as teenagers and tried different kind of careers, tried a taster, which was like what transition year is sold as, but this was a real life experience of earning money and having the budgeting power of that, and the choices that gives a young person, the experience that gives a young person. And then, so I know people who waited till they were 23 and got into degrees as a mature student when the leaving cert is not required. I know people who said, I really want to do that course. I've been home educated and unschooled, not used curriculum. And at 17 said, right, I'm going to knuckle down and go into school and do my leaving cert in 1 year or in 2 years and access the university course that I want that way. And there are all sorts of paths, I guess, is what I'm saying. What is sad to me when my young people did go into university, and I would check in every so often and say, well, how many started your year? And they might say 24. How many graduated after 3 or 4 years? 14. So there's a huge fall off in the level of people who have been put into creches when they were 9 months or 11 months, put into play school in the ECI year then when they're 3 and 4, put into school when they're 4 or 5, put into secondary school when they're 12 or 13, gone to university at 19 because that's what their family expected, and discover, I don't like this course, it's not what I want to do. I need some time out to actually choose what it is my interests are. And I know plenty of people in their 30s and 40s who have come through that system and are now saying that they've been doing something they disliked their entire life. How do you know what you like when you've always been made do what you don't like? The way to prepare for an independent life is to be given independence as soon as you can have it. And for that might be a 3-year-old picking what socks they're wearing today.
Yeah.
It'll look different at different ages. But if you foster independence and if you foster decision making by allowing children, it's really about respect. They can be sovereign too about how they spend their hours. And I guess the real take home, if there's one message, it would be John Holt, who's the father of unschooling. He died in 1985. There's some of his stuff available on YouTube, and his books are out there. The Underachieving School, How Children Fail, How Children Learn, Teaching Your Children at Home is one of his books. But Pat Barenga has kind of taken up the mantle of John Holt and has kept his writings alive. He was a public school. He wasn't a parent. He was a public school teacher in Boston, but he spent a lot of time with families and he observed small children learning. And I would urge people who are thinking about home education to read his books. But his 2-word summary is trust children. Trust children.
I'll
Children
put
do not want
Monica. I'll add all of those links into the description for everyone. All the books that you've referenced, the Home Education Network, and all of the things you've discussed. I'll put it in the description for listeners to be able to reference as well. So that's great reference points. And trust children, I think, I think we do as parents underestimate the power of a child's independence, resilience, intelligence at times, and confidence. If we just sort of let children be children, they really can do amazing things. Like I don't teach my daughter to paint. I don't have an artistic painting skill in my body. I don't teach my son Lego, but to let them go and just do it. It's amazing how their creative brains can come up with solutions on their own without being forced in a system where they're widgets. It's a square peg, it's a round hole. You have to sheep dip them through the process. So that's really good. The other question that we got recently on a few emails is, I want to home educate my child, but I don't know what requirements I have to do to just take them out of school tomorrow from a legal perspective for the state. So if you could touch on that, that would be great.
Yes, so as I said before, Bunreacht na Héireann, the Constitution of Ireland says that parents are the primary educators. So you have full legal protection in Ireland to assume the responsibility for your children's education. If you've enrolled your children in school, then there is a process. If you would like to keep good relations with your local school, and I would suggest trying to keep good relations when you can, although what I often see is parents withdrawing their children when they're at the end of their tether and they have either represented to the school how difficult their child is finding a particular adult they have to deal with, a particular child they have to deal with. There could be a bullying situation, there could be a special needs education. What the Home Education Network in Ireland has found in a survey they did some years back was that for about half the families surveyed, they had withdrawn their children from school. So they had gone from a schooling setting to home education. And for about 40% of those children, they felt that, or 40% of the respondents to the survey said that their children's special education needs were not being met in the school system. So that's just by the by. But sorry, to get back to your question, so you would just inform the school, literally inform the school. Now, a lot of bullying of parents can go on at that point, where a school principal or a school teacher or someone in the school institution will say, you can't do that. So that's not true. Or you have to do this, this, and this, or you have to fill in this form, or you have to get TUSLA approval before you can. And none of that is true. If you're following the letter of the Education Welfare Act, you simply get the form and fill that in as the mum and dad and say, this is what I intend to provide my children as a certain minimum education. So the Irish Constitution says parents are primary educators, and then it also follows up by saying that the Minister for Education has to ensure that every child gets a certain minimum education. That has never been defined, but there are guidelines. And it's a very easy form to fill in. It can look daunting to parents. I would always suggest if you go the route of filling in the form and sending it in to the Alternative Education Registration Service of TUSLA, be vague in the form. You don't know if you're withdrawing an 8, 9, 10-year-old, what it is they are going to be focused on. And it generally it has been taking between 18 months and 2 years for some families to have an authorised person come and speak to the parent about how they intend to home educate from when they submit the form, if they choose that route. It's not a route that our family went down. Yeah, we were more or less left to get on with it,
So, Monica, if I can pause for a second just to get my head around everything you said there. So as the Article 42, I know in the Constitution, it's very strong protection for parents here in Ireland. So options are, you don't have to fill out any paperwork. You can just advise the school, I'm withdrawing my children today. They don't go back tomorrow. That's it. You don't need to do any paperwork, or you can opt to do paperwork if you wish. Did I understand that correctly?
So I know families who haven't done the paperwork.
Okay.
Generally, they're not families who have withdrawn from school. So there is definitely a difference if your child has been on a school roll.
Okay.
I know families where the parents went after a couple of years of having kids in school and said, you know what, we're going back to home education. Our kids went in at 8, 9, and now at 9, 10, they want to come out, and it doesn't suit our family to drive a half hour to the school that we've chosen. And the school principal turned around to the parents and said, your kids are such an asset to the school. Could you flexi school? Would you just bring them 2 or 3 days a week? If you ask the Department of Education, and if you ask on various forums and Facebook pages, you'll be told flexi schooling is not allowed in Ireland. But, there is, like learning, there is no one size fits all. And parents, if they decide that this is the route their family would like to go on, will find a way to do it. So specifically, if your child is on the school roll, you may be told that you need authorization before you can withdraw them. That isn't true. You decide the child is coming out today and you take your child out and you are home educating. You may choose then, just so that you have ticked the box, to fill in form R1 and submit that to TUSA, and they will then send an authorized person to discuss your educational philosophy and your choices for your child's education. They don't need to meet the child, they don't need to speak with them, and they certainly are not allowed to quiz the child. There is no kind of standardized testing that home educators have to do. I know in America, in all the states, I think home education is legal. In several states, you just say, "Hi, we're home educating, good luck." And that's all you have to do. I think in at least, the last time I checked, I think in 13 states, you just inform the state that you're home educating. In some, you need to be a certified teacher. I think New York is bringing that in, or may already have that in place. And in some, your children will have to do an annual exam. So we're very blessed in this country that the Constitution guarantees the rights of parents to provide the education for their children. And if you choose to fill in the form, our family didn't. I mean, my 13-year-olds came out of secondary school and we didn't fill in a form for them, and the law had changed. That would have been 2000 and 2007, and certainly the law was enacted by that point. But you know, it's very, like, it's one of those things where it's hard to give a definitive answer, because it can vary so much from parent to parent. You know, I know parents who've moved in order to not have official scrutiny, but and I know parents who had the process, had the authorized person come out to their home and didn't like the report when they saw it and said, "We disagree with this and we request another authorized person." So over 90 something percent of parents are added to the register of children being home educated in this country. But my kids have never been on that register and they've always been home educated. So take the
Yeah, it's great.
statistics and
It's
take
great
the
to know
bureaucracy
that
with a pinch of salt.
it's great to know that, I suppose, just reminding any parent listening that parents have the power. You are, under the Constitution, the primary educator, no matter how the school may convey, or in some cases, you know, bully the parents and cause conflict. Article 42, you are the primary educator. And unless there's a referendum to change the Constitution, they can't take that away. Now, we can be sure that they'll probably try to make those changes, but we saw what happened last March when they tried to change the Constitution. So hopefully that will never be changed. Parents will always have that power. So that's great. I'm looking at my list of questions that have come in. I think we've covered about parents, just to recap: believing in themselves, knowing they're good enough. We talked about affordability, home education, co-ops. We talked about the social aspect, the third level education aspect, the requirements, whether to use a curriculum or not. And we've covered so much, and we're just under the hour mark. So before we conclude, Monica, is there anything that you'd like to end with for all of the parents listening who have asked for this information? I'll just kind of wide open without any question, just anything you want to conclude with today.
I guess the bottom line for me is, you know, childhood's really short. And if you'd like your values to have the best chance of being passed on to your children, then it's up to you to maximize the time that you can do that. And you can preach and you can talk, but nothing says you care about your children as much as spending time with them. And that's not like we were all, you know, in each other's faces all the time. The thing parents get scared about is that if they change things, if they withdraw an 8, 9, 10-year-old from school, that they will feel obligated to provide entertainment and educational opportunities. But what you find with when you make the sea change to a parent being available to their children, you will find that everybody relaxes into that, and that it actually just becomes, family life flows better when you don't have a school bell dictating what time we have to get up in the morning, what time we have to eat, and what time we have to leave our home.
Yeah, that's great. I think I'm sold already. So I really want to thank you, Monica, for taking the time out of your busy day to answer so many questions for our listeners. And I'll make sure again that we include all of the links of all the books you referenced, the Home Education Network, and everything else, so people can do their own research. But people may, from this conversation, have a lot more questions in their minds. So I would ask anyone listening to email us your questions through our website, naturalwomenscouncil.ie, or comment your questions on the YouTube. We do try to read every single comment that comes in, and we will be doing a series. We already have about 5 other home educators, some with 20 years experience, some who are just starting out, ready to come on to our home education hub podcast. So we have lots more to follow and lots more information. I think there's a really very increased desire to learn more, a big appetite to learn more about home educating, particularly with what has surfaced in the education system that we've seen over the last couple of years, and things that we've exposed. People really are keen to learn more about this topic. So thanks again for coming on. I'm sure it won't be our last conversation.
Thanks so much, Jana, for having me. And I mean, I'm always available at the end of the phone, and I mean that. And so people have driven across several counties, sat at my kitchen table, had a cup of tea or coffee, browsed my books, taken a box of books home, and 3 years later posted them back to me, or met me at a conference and handed them back to me. I mean, the resources are there, the help is there. What's lacking is the self-belief. And it's really sad that it's really school often has made parents feel that they were failures at a particular subject. Well, you're your child's only mum or dad. And what happens at the end of the day with their education, like, you choose the environment for your child. And if that's your home, I think that's a really good place to start.
Yeah, great. Thanks very much.